Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to take a couple of minutes, let some people come in before we get started. Welcome to today's webinar, Non-Essential Challenges, the Impact of the COVID-19 Pandemic on Commercial Real Estate, presented by Ed Smith. And in case you don't know, my name is Jonathan. I am the Commercial Network Liaison at the Long Island Board of Realtors, and I also work in the communications department. So today it's an honor for me to actually be introducing Ed. So Ed Smith has over 4 decades of experience in commercial and investment real estate brokerage, leasing, sales, and management. For many years, he had his own brokerage firm on Long Island. He then served as a consultant to the trade and finally spent 11 years as a regional director for Coldwell Banker Commercial NRT before semi-retiring in 2014. Over the last 20 years, Ed has personally trained over 15,000 agents how to do commercial and investment real estate brokerage. Ed is the author of 12 books, and he had over 200 articles published on commercial real estate. Included are 4 textbooks for Dearborn Publishing, where he also trains the trainers. He developed instructor training materials to accompany these textbooks, which have been used to teach commercial courses throughout the United States. So without further ado, please welcome today's speaker, Ed Smith.
Thank you. New York State is currently in a state of emergency, and what that means is that licensees are prohibited from making any cold calls. Real estate licensees may not make any unsolicited phone calls to any member of the public. You are prohibited from calling a FSBO to solicit the listing, but you may call a FSBO if you have an identifiable purchaser interested in the property. You may still perform business-to-business calls so long as you're calling a business number. That gives you the opportunity to call prior clients and see how they're doing during this pandemic. All of the types of marketing is available. And what we're going to see is an increase actually in the marketing that we're doing with the various commercial websites, and in particular with social media. So these rules and the social distancing have made our business more difficult and more challenging. The effects of the pandemic are being felt throughout the commercial real estate industry. During this pandemic, new tools have been developed to help us with our work. NAR's RPR, Realtors Property Resource Commercial section, has expanded its database thanks to partnerships like Bervitas and CREXI, as well as agreements with various MLSs and other organizations. We can search more than 450,000 listings across the country, which includes non-realtor and realtor properties. Perhaps even more impressive and directly connected to commercial comps is the 55 million off-market properties that are also available, allowing you to look for similar properties to your subject that have recently sold or are currently listed throughout the nation. You can get commercial property reports, which include the owner's name and address, trade area reports with expanded demographics, trade area analysis, and best practices for a specific location. Great tools. If you're not using them, look at it today. As we increase our marketing and start to have more people responding to the listings that we are posting, we need to comply with the agency and the new fair housing regulations. Upon first substantive contact, New York State law requires that a real estate broker must always disclose who the real estate broker is representing in a transaction. Residential transactions require the completion of the agency disclosure form. Commercial transactions have the same fiduciary duties, but do not require written disclosure, except if it was dual agency or advance consent to dual agency. So when a prospective client responds to your marketing and wants further information about the property, you have first substantial contact. You must explain at that point who you are representing, or you could use the residential agency form to get that information in writing. Also, upon first substantive contact, the new fair housing disclosure form must be signed. Every prospective buyer, tenant, seller, or landlord must sign this form, and it includes every type of property, specifically including commercial and vacant land. This is the two-page form. It tells the consumer what things could be considered as discrimination and how to file a complaint. On the second page, they acknowledge they were given it and have had an opportunity to read it. The disclosure regulations require that a poster with the same information be displayed in every real estate office window. And if there's an open house, whether it's residential or commercial, a copy of that poster must be displayed. This is what the fair housing poster looks like. All websites created and maintained by real estate brokers, associate brokers, salespersons, real estate teams shall prominently and conspicuously display on the homepage of the site a link to this poster. And by prominently displaying it, what they basically mean, it's got to be the first thing that people see on your homepage without having to scroll down to find it. As a result of the pandemic, we saw a tremendous amount of flights being canceled. We have travel restrictions with other countries. We have travel restrictions even within our own country at this point. So the tourism, the aircraft industry has suffered tremendously as a result of this pandemic. This has affected us in kind of an indirect way. National companies have site selectors, people who go out and look at a potential place for them to open a new business, open a new franchise, move their business to, whatever the case might be. Effectively, they're not traveling anymore. This is causing us now to have to do business differently. As an example, when I was doing brokerage, I had a site that I thought would be ideal for a tutor time childcare center. So I sent the package over to these folks, and they sent a site selector. They flew into New York. They stayed here a couple of days. They looked at the site. They looked at the surrounding area. And then the next day, they flew out to Ohio to do the same thing. As it turns out, Tutor Time only had 3 site selectors for the entire country. So these people were flying around basically all the time. In the current issue of NAR's Commercial Digest, we have an article, Real Estate's Pandemic Pulse. It cites several other examples of companies now imposing travel restrictions on their executives. Where site selectors would previously fly in and stay a few days, now they fly in and out in the same day. There's a great paranoia about the cleanliness and safety of staying in a hotel at this point in time. And there's also another issue of, in some cases, finding food service. So what's being done is now if we have a potential site for a company, we're going to have to take a virtual tour of that building and the area that that building is located in. And we'll send that virtual tour to the site selector who's probably going to be working in an office in their home. When it's time for discussions, it'll be a virtual conference. That's going to be the new norm, probably for quite a while. COVID-19 basically wiped out tourism and business travel. New York City's having a tremendous number of hotels that are permanently closing. The picture over there, the Roosevelt Hotel, well, that was built almost 100 years ago. It was built in 1924 and named for President Teddy Roosevelt, and now it's closing. In a report on the hotel industry by PricewaterhouseCoopers, they interviewed Vijay Dandapani, who is the president of the Hotel Association of New York, representing over 300 hotels. He said in the past summer, only 7% of the 120,000 rooms were filled. In 2019, in the summer, the occupancy level of the hotels was 80%. It's gotten a little bit better. In September, however, 58% of all the hotel rooms in New York City were still closed. When you have occupancy around 40%, you can't run a hotel on that. Hotel revenues have declined 81% since 2019. Dandapani also said, if half of the city's 640 hotels survive, that would be a great outcome. According to a report on CNBC, 34% of all the hotels in New York City are delinquent on their debts. The report quotes an executive at a leading hospitality investment bank as saying the closures thus far are merely the tip of the iceberg, with more likely to follow. The city was already overbuilt before the pandemic hit, but because New York City was the earliest big hotspot for COVID-19, tourists and business travelers alike have been staying away from the city. So what's going to happen to all of these empty hotel buildings? Is there a possibility of reuse? Well, logically, what comes to mind, maybe they could be converted to condos, maybe they could be easily converted to apartments. But in a Channel 7 on Your Side investigation, they requested from the U.S. Post Office how many families had requested a change of address and were moving outside of New York City. In the month of March alone, there was a 256% increase in the people moving out of the city compared to the same month a year ago. Overall, since March, over 246,000 people have filed a change in address request. That's almost a 100% increase compared to the same time period in 2019. In a different report from CNBC News, the number of apartments for rent in Manhattan tripled in September to nearly 16,000 apartments sitting empty. And that data came from Douglas Elliman. The vacancy rate in Manhattan for apartments is typically 2%. Now it is just under 6%. The median net effective income rents have fallen by 11%. Now, this is not just New York City. This is occurring in all the major cities in the country. They're having the same problem where people are leaving the city and moving to the suburbs or the surrounding communities. It's going to take some time to eventually see the fate of those hotel buildings. Will they be foreclosed on? Will another hotel chain buy them when the pandemic is behind us? Well, as you can see, we've got lots of challenges. We also find that new development and new construction, for the most part, is paused. A friend of mine just listed an assemblage in Long Island City, 2 adjacent lots with buildings on them. The highest and best use would be to redevelop this property into residential condos. A year ago, developers would be bidding for this property. Today, there is no interest. The ongoing pandemic and the economic uncertainty, as well as the previous mention of the number of people leaving the city, have developers pausing on any speculative projects. With most offices holding at a 50% occupancy level and the large work-at-home population, all levels of government have basically slowed down. As an example, in a Globe Street report, they track returning workers in 10 major cities: New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Boston, and others. In New York City, only 16.9% of the city employees have returned to their offices. Out of those 10 cities, New York City is the lowest rate of return. But the average rate of return of workers to their offices in all the major cities is only averaging 27.1%. That's almost 75% of the workers in the city still working from home. So the process of getting things done, getting the building permits, the zoning changes, certificates of occupancy, all the things that we need for our sales and development has slowed down tremendously. Not only that, we have the same problems going on as far as getting engineer inspections, environmental inspections, who's working, who's available, when can they access the buildings. These are all additional challenges to our business at this time. The office market, well, we've gone through stages. The non-essential office buildings were closed. We got into the work from home. Then they gave us guidelines on how to reopen, which required physical changes to the space. Less desks and cubicles, plexiglass partitions, social distancing protocols, staying 6 foot apart. The conference rooms were closed and replaced with video conferencing. Common areas were closed, no more kitchenettes, no more coffee stations. That's probably the one that hurts the most. So we have this 50% occupancy issue. The work at home, whether it's full or part-time, well, some like it and some hate it, but it's here to stay. Projections are that 15 to 20% of the office workforce will permanently be working from home, or a company will rotate who is in the office by having employees only come into the building maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and the rest of the time they work from home. Mark Zuckerberg said that as many as 50% of his Facebook employees could be working remotely within the next 5 years. With 50% occupancy, less space is required due to less employees in the building at any given time. But this is currently being offset because of more space being used for the required social distancing. However, some businesses are consolidating locations and some are closing. So we are seeing an increase in vacancy. Who is going to pay for all of these renovations and safety protocols? Well, Under the CARES Act, qualified improvement property was made eligible for bonus depreciation. 100% of the cost of the qualified improvement property can be taken as depreciation in the year that it was purchased. This is defined as improvement, any improvement made by the taxpayer to the interior portion of the building, which is non-residential real estate. So whoever pays for the construction of the renovations and safety protocols, whether it's the landlord or the tenant, they will be able to take the tax deduction in its entirety this year. Tenants with short-term leases are in a good negotiating position because landlords are afraid of vacancy. These tenants may be able to get rent reductions or deferrals now and be able to rent less space with future rent reductions in exchange for renewing their leases. Moody's Analytics has predicted office vacancies in 2021 could reach 20%. Cushman & Wakefield are predicting a loss of 145 million square feet of office space nationally in 2021. This type of vacancy level creates competition, and that will reduce rents. Reduced rental income will lower buildings' values. People want to socialize. After the vaccines are distributed and health situations come under control, the social distancing in many of the office buildings may become somewhat relaxed. And with the work at home still in play, this is going to create excess space. Subleasing their surplus space or moving to downsize will be options that these tenants have. Either way, we can certainly expect more office vacancy. Let's look specifically at the Long Island office market. Vacancy has continued to rise. It is now at 10%. It was 9.2% in the second quarter. It was 7.5% 1 year ago. The vacancy in Nassau is currently 9.2% and Suffolk 11.1%. The average rent is $27.02. That's gone up a little bit from the second quarter, where it was $25.45 per square foot. The rent in Nassau County is $29, and the rent in Suffolk County is $24.24. Class A office space, however, landlords are still asking over $30 a square foot. Net absorption is negative. We have more property going on the market than is being rented. Net absorption for the third quarter was almost 400,000 square feet. Net absorption for the year so far is negative 1 million square feet. And there is no new office construction going on. Significant office sales, though there was not a lot of major transactions. In the third quarter, only 6 sales occurred on office buildings over 15,000 square feet. And here we highlight 4 of them. Of note, the King Cullen supermarket chain sold its former headquarters at 185 Central Avenue in Bethpage. They sold it to an investor who has leased the property to NYU Langone Health. What we're going to see is we're going to see different entities coming into these buildings. We're going to see more and more activity coming out from the medical sector. King Cullen is downsizing its corporate headquarters and moving to 102 Motor Parkway in Hauppauge. And here we see our office leases, once again highlighted by the NYU taking 60,000 square feet in Bethpage, King Cullen downsizing, and another medical entity coming in, Northwell Health in Great Neck, 11,000 square. If we look at our retail market, the retail market was in flux before the pandemic even hit. COVID-19 initially shut down all non-essential stores. Gradually, most were able to open under the specific guidelines and restrictions. We have different things going on in different sectors. Let's back up a minute. By 2018, e-commerce was seriously affecting real estate. In April 2019, CNN Business reported that they expected 6,000 retail stores would close by year's end. In reality, by year's end 2019, over 7,000 stores had actually closed. Some of those retailers included Payless, the shoe store, 2,500 stores, Gymboree, 850 stores, Dress Barn, 600 stores, Family Dollar, 390 stores, Sears closed 70 stores, and Jewelers, Kay, Jared, Zales, so closed 159 stores. What's also going on is the face of retail has changed. The millennial generation now controls 70% of the spending power in the United States. The I generation, young adults, 18 to 25, they're now shoppers too. The challenge for retail was, how do I get them into my store? So appealing to those groups are entertainment venues mixed into the retail centers, movies, bowling, fitness centers, and casual restaurants. So mall owners started replacing the closed stores with those venues and other non-traditional retailers. And then the pandemic occurred. The enclosed malls created a special challenge to reopen. Governor Cuomo required they have a specific and costly air filtration system. Buildings should have or install high efficiency particulate air filters with a minimum efficiency reporting value, that's MERV, M-E-R-V, rating capable of filtering COVID-19 particles. This has actually created a problem for New York City, which has current laws that require all buildings over 25,000 square feet that their buildings must be benchmarked and filed an annual report. Now, benchmarking is the measuring of how much energy, electricity, and water a building uses, and most importantly, how many carbon emissions the building produces. Local law, New York City Local Law 97, as part of the Climate Mobilization Act of May 2019, is focused on reducing buildings' carbon emissions. The law establishes carbon emission limits for every type of building. Starting in 2024, building owners must submit an annual carbon intensity report, and if their building's carbon emissions exceed those limits, they will be subject to severe fines. The problem is the MERV air filters will combat the virus, but the more outside air you bring into a building and the higher rated your filter is, the more energy you use and the more carbon emissions are created. Now, this is a new issue that has yet to be resolved. Slowly, malls are returning. People are shopping again in the malls. Most of the stores have opened, but the food courts, however, are takeout only, and not all of those food court vendors have reopened. Retail for the last few years has been ever changing. We have learned that considerable business may be done over the internet, but people still want to be able to visit brick and mortar stores. Going shopping at the mall will be slow until the virus is controlled. Then activity will pick up again because shopping at the mall is fun and it's a social experience. Our large retail stores were the first that were allowed to reopen, but their guidelines made shopping a little less fun. The e-commerce competition continues to increase. So what they ended up doing in these stores is social distancing, one-way aisles, limited occupancy, no dressing rooms, no trying on clothes. So people were in a situation where they might have to buy an item in two sizes, and then because they don't know which one will fit, try it on at home, and then a second trip back to the store to return it. It's getting inconvenient. It's expected of many of these stores that they will look to downsize in the future, moving perhaps to smaller buildings or co-tenanting their space. For example, we see a Target store and they put a CVS store inside their store. Retail on Main Street, these were the hardest hit by COVID-19 related closures. These businesses could least afford the required social distancing and safety guidelines. Staying open is a serious challenge. Paying the rent is a big problem. The prolonged closure forced many of these small businesses to close. Negotiating with the landlord about the rent is a necessity. With closures and lease defaults, there is expected to be a lot of retail space to rent. Vacancy is the kiss of death for landlords. So it is in the best interest to work things out with existing tenants. Even if the landlord must forego rent for a few months, it may be a better choice than having vacant space. They can add the months of rent that were forgiven to the end of the lease. Tenants can offer to extend their lease for rent deferments too. Another solution that could help both sides might be to temporarily pay a percentage of the store's monthly gross rent in lieu of rent. Mostly monthly gross income in lieu of rent. Landlords have to also consider, with all this available space, it would mean that new tenants will be in a strong position to negotiate favorable terms and lower rent. So they really need to try to make a deal with the tenant. So we can expect to see rents decrease. With rent decreasing, we would expect building values to decline too. However, with the interest rates as low as they are, landlords who can retain their tenants will be in a position to refinance their loans and lower their debt service costs. When it comes to restaurants, guidance and restrictions keep changing. We started out with no indoor seating, takeout only. Then we were adding the outdoor seating, but here comes winter. 25% occupancy, then 50% indoor seating, then more restrictions, maybe backtracking is in the horizon right now with the second wave coming in. I mean, realistically, how do you hire half a chef? How do you hire half a waitress? This sector of the industry has seen tremendous turbulence. How long can you run a business this way? Restaurant profit margins are low to begin, and this problem is all over. In New York City, a record high 88% of restaurants could not pay full October rent, according to the latest survey of more than 400 restaurants, bars, and nightclub venues that are analyzed by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. That percentage has gradually increased throughout this pandemic. Andrew Reggie, the executive director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, said, going on 8 months now, more than 24,000 restaurants, bars, and clubs citywide that are so critical to New York's economic and social fiber have been in dire straits. Of those that couldn't pay full rent, 30% paid nothing at all. Some restaurants have managed to make new arrangements with their landlords. 41% have had their rent waived. 68% are seeing half or so of their rent waived. And 33% have been able to receive deferrals. Unfortunately, it is expected that at least 30% of all of the restaurants in the metropolitan area will permanently close. However, restaurant turnover is normal for this industry. Many restaurateurs plan on opening a restaurant, building up their business for 3 or 4 years, and selling that now successful business, and then doing the same thing over and over again. So sooner or later, most of these restaurants that may end up closing will probably reopen with a new owner. Outdoor dining has been allowed in New York City since the city entered phase 2 back in late June. Over 10,000 restaurants have opted in to the open restaurant program. It's proven to be one of the few lifelines for the restaurant industry in this devastating period. Because of that, Mayor de Blasio announced at the end of September that outdoor dining would be made permanent and year-round. Heat lamps are permitted, as are tents and structures. The New York City Code defines outdoor space as open air space designed for the consumption of food and beverage, which may have temporarily or fixed cover, awnings, or roof, so long as such cover has at least 2 open sides for airflow. With such outdoor space, tables and seats must be at least 6 foot apart from any other table, seat, patron, or pedestrian thoroughfare or corridor. Well, I'm looking at this structure and I'm kind of saying to myself, when the snow comes, how is that going to work out? Challenges all over the place. In 2020, store closings have increased, but other stores are expanding. Dollar General is planning on opening 975 new stores in 2020. In the first quarter, they opened up 250 new stores. Tractor Supply opened 38 new stores so far this year, and their sales are up 35%. Lidl opened its first store on Long Island in December 2019. This grocery chain now has 6 stores open and plans additional stores in Astoria, East Northport, Franklin Square, Lake Grove, Massapequa, and Oakdale. They expect to be opening 50 stores throughout the U.S. by the end of 2021. Aldi grocery stores plans to add 70 stores during the second half of 2022, adding up to 2,000 stores that they currently have in 32 states. BJ's wholesale clubs have reported their sales are up over 300% this year, largely due to their digital business. They will be opening 2 new stores by the end of this year, one in Long Island City and one in Newburgh, New York. Some of the fast foods are doing great. Chipolats order ahead mobile pickup lanes has business up over 140%. They opened 37 new stores in 2020 second quarter. Taco Bell is adding multiple pickup lanes, and they too are going mobile. It's enabling them to reduce their footprint from 2,500 square feet to 1,325. So our retail market, well, our pricing has always varied according to location on the island. So that's pretty much the same, $25 to $40 per square foot, depending on where the stores are located. Vacancy rate is currently at 6.8%. And I gave a quick check on LoopNet. We basically have around 450 retail buildings for sale currently, and we have over 800 retail stores available for lease, pretty much balanced out between the 3 counties. When it comes to investment properties, almost any property can be rented to others and be investment property, whether it's office, retail, industrial, or multifamily. New York State imposes a transfer tax on all real estate sales over $500 of 0.4%. New York City imposes an additional transfer tax on all residential and commercial sales. Effective on July 1st in 2019, New York City added an MTA surcharge to its transfer tax for all real estate. So if we combine everything here on commercial property, let's just look at the bottom line. Any commercial property that's going to sell for over $2 million is going to have a transfer tax of 3.275%. If we sold a commercial building in Queens for $2,500,000, the combined transfer taxes would be $81,875. No matter how you cut it, that's a lot of money. Transfer tax. The REBNY president, James Whelan, talked to us about transfer taxes. Despite the uptick in investment and residential sales over the last month, the drop-off in tax revenue for such deals this year has reached $1.4 billion in New York City. Commercial sales figures continue to be below average as the market figures out how to price properties, as more people are working from home and shopping online. Dramatic drops in tax revenues have long been expected as a byproduct of the coronavirus. In October 2020, tax revenue from investment sales was only $95 million, which was an increase of 4% over September, but is down by 52% over this point last year. Last month, New York State Controller Thomas DiNapoli reported that tax revenue on the state level was down $2.8 billion since April 1st. These budget deficits will somehow have to be made up. There may be cuts in services, there may be higher taxes, maybe there'll be some federal assistance. We do have some positive news. the net lease investments. Investors are getting back into the game. A report from Chris Pappas, director at Marcus and Millichap. It has been 8 months now since March, and since the lockdowns have been in full effect, people have had time to digest the impact of the sector. Now they're deciding to get back into and take the risk, get a little better, higher yield, and not chase those essential retail assets that everyone else is targeting. Investors are looking to buy long-term leased assets that have reliable cash flows and continue to weather the economic uncertainties. They're focused on net leases for big boxes like Home Depot, Lowe's, Hobby Lobby. Unique businesses are also targets when we've got assets with cell phone tenants or dialysis centers, net leases. And it's also be driven by the low interest rates. Let's look at our industrial market. The demand for industrial space has been increasing over the last few years, predominantly warehouse space for fulfillment and delivery servicing centers, fueled by the increasing e-commerce sales. The pandemic has created additional needs for expanding grocery product and delivery, plus storage of medical equipment and supplies. A report from Jones Lang LaSalle states that the growth of these fulfillment and distribution centers will require another billion square feet of industrial space by 2025. Here on the island in the third quarter, industrial leasing on the island returned to pre-COVID levels with over 1.4 million square feet leased. Vacancy, however, continues to rise. It's at 4.6%, 5.9% in Nassau, 3.9% in Suffolk. Rents are averaging from 2016 to the first quarter of 2019, rents increased roughly 10% annually. However, from first quarter 2019 to the present, rents have seen very little change. Rents are currently averaging $13.70 per square foot, where in the second quarter it was a little less, $12.98 per square foot. That breaks down to $13.84 in Nassau, $12.02 in Suffolk. Net absorption is still a negative number, and net absorption over 1.7 million for the year. Good news is we have almost 800,000 square feet of industrial space under construction. Significant sales. You see a few examples here. In the third quarter, sales totaled 531,386 square feet. The bad news is this is a 42% decrease over the same time last year. The average sales price for the quarter is $152 per square foot. We had a number of significant industrial leases. Amazon leased 100 Precision Drive in Shirley to serve as another last mile delivery center for the east end of Long Island. This is their third such building on Long Island, with others in Carl Place and Bethpage, bringing their total square footage on the island to almost 350,000 square feet. So we can make some conclusions about what's going on. Travel restrictions and fear of hotels is slowing down travel and business decisions. How we present properties is changing to virtual tours and conferencing. Hospitality is in serious trouble. New development and new construction are paused Office markets are forever changed with the work at home. Vacancy is expected to increase, which should drive the rents down. Retail is churning as usual. Some stores are closing or downsizing, others are expanding. E-commerce is still growing. Malls are slowly attracting shoppers again. Main Street retail has landlords and tenants making deals for both of them to survive. Restaurants are still in serious trouble. The declines in New York State and city tax revenues will have to be made up somehow. The industrial market is doing well and will need to grow to satisfy future demand. A vaccine is coming. We have to be patient and we have to stay safe. We've got to wear the masks. We've got to do the social distancing. We've got to wash our hands frequently. How we do business now is different. Vacancies and downsizing is going to create opportunities for us. And one of the things we should be doing and are allowed to doing, even under the state of emergency, is to contact former clients. If you've put people into leases or you sold them buildings, see how they're doing, see what their plans are for the future. A couple of announcements. LIBOR has a commercial network, and if you're interested in doing commercial work, you should join that. Typically, our meetings are on the fourth Tuesday of the month. Next one is next week. We meet on Zoom from 8 to 10 in the morning. We have an opportunity to network a little bit. We have an opportunity to present our haves and wants. There'll be a speaker at our meeting, and then everyone gets an opportunity to talk about what properties they're looking to sell or lease and what properties they're looking for. Go to the commercial network on Facebook and you'll find a link to how to register for the meetings. Perhaps you want to become a commercial and investment real estate certified agent. This is a comprehensive course that teaches you the skills you need to do commercial transactions. 22 and a half hours of CE, including 1 hour of agency. It's being delivered now as 6 Zoom meetings, each from 9 to 12:45. The next classes are in February, first 2 weeks of February. Go to LIBOR's website to register. I've written a number of books, as was stated earlier, and these books are being sold on Amazon. The easiest way to get to them is to search by author, use my full name, Edward S. Smith, Jr. And that concludes today's program. If we have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Yeah, Ed, thank you so much. We have 2 in the Q&A. First one was my team works strictly with off-market high-value assets, both nationally and internationally. Is there any content in this webinar that relates to our business?
Well, hopefully you've seen the webinar. You can answer that question yourself.
And then another gentleman just asked if we'd make the slides available.
Well, that's up to LIBOR, so you can let me know what you'd like to do in that regard.
Yeah, so just so everybody knows, we will be, this webinar was recorded and it will be available on lirealtor.com/COVID. So feel free to check there by the end of the week to revisit this. And I guess we'll give, now that we got Evelyn says thank you.
Okay.
And if we don't have any other questions, I think we've got one more. What are you advising clients looking to sell? Wait till after vaccines?
Not necessarily. It depends on what sector they're in. Some of them are going to be forced to sell because their business is giving them trouble. Others are going to have situations where in office and in retail, we're probably going to see increases in vacancies. creating higher competition, and that's going to be creating lower rents. So the lower rents would cause the value of their buildings to go down. So it might be good for them to try to get rid of them as soon as possible if they expect to sell them.
Great, awesome. All right, and Keith Wilson says hello.
Hi, Keith.
Joseph Albano, do the same rules apply to commercial as they do in residential regarding exclusives and listing brokers cooperation?
Basically, the answer is yes, there are some subtle differences. The most important thing is when you're co-broking, make sure you get your agreements in writing.
All right, we'll give it another minute to see if anything else comes through. And also too, as far as the commercial network Facebook group, you can also visit cnlibor.org, which is our website that you can get some more information about the network. And there's a direct link right on that page to join our Facebook group. So feel free to find it that way if it's easier. And we don't have any other questions coming through, so I think that'll do it. So thank you so much, Ed, for taking your time today to go over this with everybody. It's very informative. And we'll have it up on our lirealtor.com/COVID before the week is over.
Good luck to everyone.
All right. Thank you, Ed.